and welcome to this short film on buying business services. So what is business services? Well, as you can see here on the slide, there are plenty of different services that is now being bought in, for example, facility services. And as we have seen that we are now in some of the chapters we have looked at, focusing in on our core business and then looking for outside experts to do what we are not highly professional within, then we have a tendency to outsource that, and services is certainly an area that we have seen being outsourced quite a bit over the last decade. So as I said, facility services, financial services, we have seen that being moved even offshore, out to India, for example, where then the financial transactions are being done. You see human resource services, IT services, even marketing services is being outsourced as well. Transportation and distribution services certainly being outsourced, and we have seen that especially a lot here in this country, where we are outsourcing our especially our transportation. The 3PLs are having a much better opportunity to get economic of scale, so that has been a focus area. Our warehousing is also being outsourced, so plenty of areas where you are actually outsourcing services. Yes, there is certainly, as you can see here in the headline, there's differences between buying a product versus buying a service. And as you can see here down at the third bullet point, that a service is intangible, and we will have a look at what that really means throughout this short video. But that's a key element to look at, that a product is tangible and a service is intangible. You can also see further down that it's much about activity or a process versus a physical entity. You can see a service cannot necessarily be transported, a physical product can. A service cannot be stored versus a product can. So there are plenty of differences between them. But still, when we are saying that, the overall process of buying a service versus a product, whereby you are first specifying what you would like to buy, then you are selecting the right supplier, then you are sliding into contract negotiations, you are selecting your supplier, and then you go into execution and follow up. That process is the very same between a product versus a service. But let's just see where it differs a little bit within the content of each of these phases. So specifying a service. Here you can see on the first bullet point, specification of resources and skills needed to provide the service. So here we are much more talking about the resources and the skills versus the tolerance of a product, for example. And the throughput, specification of the process. So now we are talking about what is it for a process that we would like to outsource. And finally, down here you can see that the outcome is in explicit terms around where you make a service level agreement, but it is more focused on the value add. So for example, if you are outsourcing your maintenance of a machine, then the service level agreement will be up against, for example, the uptime, more so on the activity whereby they have to maintain it. So it's more on what is adding value for me as a customer, and that is for this machine to be running. So that is what the SLA is going to be up against, more so than specifying each of the different activities. That will be done up in the specifications, but the outcome as a SLA is going to be around the value that it is adding for me as a buyer of that service. Supplier selection, again here, intangible. So I have listed here 5 bullet points. Talk to references that the supplier is giving to you to validate the supplier's capabilities within the area that you would like to outsource to that supplier. Secondly, you can also contact your own network for references. Maybe some in your own network has actually done business with that supplier in that specific area, and so you can see and get a sense of what are their capabilities, because you have to trust that they can actually perform what you're asking them to. And since it's intangible, it is much more difficult to actually go down and specify exactly what it is that the supplier is supposed to deliver to you. Thirdly, if possible, audit the site. And here I'm thinking about if you are outsourcing a warehousing operation, then go on site to some of the sites that this supplier is operating. So for the sake of, if you are outsourcing to DSL or UPS or any of the other 3PLs that is out there, DSV for this country, then go out there and have a look and see how are they actually performing. So go on site, get a sense, get a feeling of are they in control of their processes? Are they having KPIs up there so they can actually monitor the performance of their own process? All of those things. My experience is that when you are negotiating with those suppliers, they have really excellent corporate presentations, but the real trust and belief in whether they can do what they are saying they can, I've experienced that when I'm actually out there walking through their operations and assessing whether they are actually doing performance management and all of those things. So absolutely, if possible, go on site and evaluate yourself, even via audit, and there you can maybe bring some from your quality department out there and assess the quality whereby they are performing. Just like when you're buying a product, no different here. Evaluate the financial performance of the supplier. You would like to have a supplier for the future, so hopefully they are having a healthy financial performance. It is totally worthwhile having a look at prior to signing up. And another point that can be looked at is the employee turnover. Some companies are having a little bit of trouble keeping their employees, and that high churn could in some cases impact the performance. So a little bit of stability around the employees is great to see. So once they are getting up on the learning curve, that it will be maintained at a high level. So that is also an area to look at. Then you're going into the contracting, the agreements here, as we talked about, up against the KPIs, tracking them, and periodical assessing and evaluated by the buying organization. So not too much of a different here. Over to this post-contractual stage. Hopefully you have spent a lot of time putting into specifying what it is prior to signing up that you are asking the supplier to do, and you are also taking a number of hours to actually search for a appropriate supplier list and then shortlist that down. Then you have taken the effort to select the so-called right supplier by doing the appropriate evaluation. And now you're into execution, and then you should be putting equal amount of time to secure that the performance of that supplier is going to be delivered towards the service level that you have agreed with him. And you as an organization, as a buying organization, has a huge role to play. You have to work with them, because now you have outsourced a activity to them. They might have become now a strategic supplier to you. And so you need to work with them. Maybe some of the specifications was a little bit unclear that you have sent to them. So quite often when a supplier is not performing, my experience is that when you're pointing at the supplier, three fingers is pointing back at you. So quite often it stems from the having maybe a little bit unclear communication around the process or the information that you are supplying. So be very open in my mind to working with the supplier and getting them up to speed, because as we are also hearing in for Professor Martin Christopher, is that we are not competing company against company. Nowadays it is supply chains versus supply chains, and therefore you have a huge interest in working with your suppliers to make them perform, because at the end of the day, that is how the supply chain that you are part of is performing towards the customers, and at the end of the day, the end consumer. So So here's really a area that you should consider before outsourcing activity. That is a lot of post-contractual time that you need to spend into it to make sure that it is going to be a successful partnership that you are having. So in conclusion, services is certainly increasing. We are outsourcing more services than we have seen prior. Doing the outsourcing of services is becoming more professionalized. And there is a good bit of difference because, as I said early on, products are very changeable, and you can measure the service quite easy by the tolerance of the product. For example, when you're buying a service, it's a little bit more difficult to actually measure whether we are delivering the value that we should. So there is somewhat different, but as I said early on, the overall process of selecting, specifying first of all is a little bit different. We saw that, but specifying, selecting, contract negotiation, and then go into execution and follow up, is the overall process is following the same pattern, but there's just different content within each of the phases. Yeah, that was all I had for the buying of professional services. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.